Guys, I'm back. This is probably the latest at night I've ever filmed a video. I've kind of screwed up my schedule by not having a job, and been sleeping a lot during the days. This is real bad, and up very late at nights. Anyway, but then again, what's better for the subject matter at hand during Halloween season? I had mentioned that my last video, I did Halloween non-musical CD and album collection, and I threatened to do another similar one, and I'm going to do that now. And that is, for me anyway, Halloween themed music, and in addition to that, not just Halloween themed music, but music that I associate with Halloween that in some cases has nothing to do with Halloween, but it's that mental seasonal thing that I have, that a lot of people have. I know during certain times of the year, I know when the warm weather comes, when summertime comes for some reason, I get in the mood and I start pulling out my Yellow Jackets, the jazz band Yellow Jackets, and my Wes Montgomery CDs and things like that. And it's not like a contrived thing. It's not like, oh, it's summertime, I have to go listen to Wes Montgomery. It's usually that I find that I haven't listened to his music or the Yellow Jackets or whatever it is for a while, and all of a sudden I get in the mood, and then I realize, oh, it's the seasonal thing. Happens to me every year as Christmas comes around. I get in the mood to hear Miles Davis, mostly the acoustic pre-electric stuff that he did. You know, a lot of the classic acoustic stuff that he did, even sometimes in the late 40s, but certainly in the 50s, and on into the first half of the 60s or so. And it's just, it's like a cycle, you know. It's like the weather. I guess the temperatures and the seasonal changes have something to do with some kind of mental association that I have. Well, Halloween's may be a bit different because it's a specific holiday, and that holiday I associate with, and things are marketed to the holiday too. So I don't have to make the associations because they're pre-packaged and already made for me. By the same token, I'm very much in the mood for them. I love Halloween. It's my favorite time of year. And you know, and I get in the mood. That earlier video that I showed, that had the you know, the non-musical things, a lot of stories, a lot of audiobooks. Yeah, you know, there are other times in the year that I will listen to them, but I always get the desire to hear them at Halloween. This time it's musical stuff. And I'm going to cover a little bit of ground here. A lot of these CDs, trying to think now, I don't know if I have any actual if vinyl albums so much to Halloween. Not musical stuff as much. There's a few different categories here. This is obviously the Halloween Fright Night, 1 CD and 1 DVD. There's a lot of collections like this, at least the musical side. This is a compact disc, even though it looks very cheesy. It's a compact disc. I saw this one in the store. Came out in 2006, so it's not that old. What it is, it's movie themes associated with horror movies, actually played by the 101 Strings Orchestra. So, you know, when you look at it, you might think, it's one of those kind of compilations with the Purple People Eater and the theme from the Blob and kind of silly 50s-ish songs, which I don't mind. I actually like some of that stuff. I don't really collect it so much. I probably would. I would probably have a couple of those sillier things in my collection, but they're not my primary focus. So this is the whole musical album part of it is the 101 Strings Orchestra playing John Carpenter's theme to Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street theme, the Jaws theme, the theme to The Omen, theme from one of the Hellraiser movies, even the Friday the 13th theme, Shining, and of course the Psycho theme, some of the music including the famous shower scene. This is also accompanied with a DVD, kind of a free DVD thrown in there, of the original black and white Night of the Living Dead movie. And the reason they included that in there, it's public domain. Anybody can put that movie out now for next to nothing. You could go into drugstores and CVS and all those and see copies of Night of the Living Dead for $1.99. So it's kind of one of these things that they just threw in there because it really didn't cost them anything to acquire. Interesting, fun little package. I bought this online and by a group called the Halloween Ensemble. So there's an actual entire band dedicated to, I don't know if it's a full-time, it's probably not a full-time band. They don't give any information as to who plays in the band or the makeup of the group. It appears to be like a string ensemble kind of thing. So it's probably a group of musicians that play under other names, and this is kind of thing because they don't list the instrumentation. It's kind of weird. They don't list the instrumentation, who plays on it. Not a lot of information on it, but it's a kind of interesting, again, a classical oriented Halloween string. Orchestra, not orchestra, but string section anyway. It's just called the Classical Halloween Haunting by the Halloween Ensemble, and I think I just saw this online and ordered it. It's the nice thing about it is it's not the same few pieces over and over again. There's a bunch of it's actually all classical music that has a slightly the weird thing is they don't list the composers, though. So you've got String Quartet number 4, but who wrote it? I don't know. There's a million String Quartet number 4. String Quartet number 15, Cello Suite number 2. So they don't tell you what composers' works they're doing, but I guess they're a little bit more of the eerie-sounding things. And I think they have more than one CD out. And this is fairly recent. There's no date on this, but I remember when I saw this. I just bought this last couple of years. And I'm pretty sure they have more than one CD out, and it's interesting from the point of view of not being the same movie themes over and over again or pop songs over and over again, but classical oriented things. There's no shortage of these, and a lot of them are very scarce on who's actually playing on them. Here's one called Very Scary Music, and again, movie themes. These are orchestral things, but they don't actually list the orchestras. And again, these are movie themes. I almost didn't buy this one, but I'm a sucker for packaging, and it was very cheap. I just liked the picture. And again, it's mostly movie themes. Themes from the X-Files. That's been a popular one to do in the last decade or so. Theme from The Exorcist. So they actually do an orchestral, kind of short, obviously shortened version of Tubular Bells. Twilight Zone theme, the Psycho Suite again. A theme from Friday the 13th again. A lot of these are obviously movie themes that crop up a whole lot. Nightmare Before Christmas, that one pops up a lot. Dracula, main title by John Williams. I forget what Dracula movie he wrote that for, what year that was for. But I want to say was it the Gary Oldman version, maybe? Theme from Jaws again. Theme from Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie. This is a 1999 thing. But they're interesting and they're fun. And there's some other cheesier ones, and this particular one, I've read the worst reviews of it. People hate it. It's by Drew's Famous is the name of the company, and they do mostly kids-oriented CDs. And this is Halloween horror movie themes. This is one that has played for years since it came out, and I want to say it's at least 15 years old or so. I talked about the Music Choice channel that we have on cable TV, and there's a channel called Sounds of the Season that play seasonal things. So at Christmas time they play Christmas themes. At Halloween time they play stuff like this, and they actually play most of the titles from this album. And what it is once again, it's all movie themes. There's a couple different ones in here. These are not the original recordings. Actually, none of these that I'm showing are. They're all redone new recordings. This one is, if you go online and you read the reviews on Amazon, everybody hates it, but I happen to love it. What this one is re-recorded themes, but this is pretty much done by a guy in a synthesizer. And I want to say it's probably early 90s. It has a kind of digital sound to it. Some of the tracks have a kind of richly orchestral sound to them that it's hard to tell, are they really coming from a synthesizer? Did they bring in additional musicians? Because again, they don't give any credit for who recorded this stuff. But it seems like these are all re-recordings of the themes. Obviously somebody had the music in front of them and was reading it, because it's quite detailed at times. Like Nightmare on Elm Street theme, Jaws theme, the Psycho theme, the X-Files theme again, The Exorcist, Halloween, The Shining is really good. But some of the synthesizer textures have that early kind of hollow digital sound. And so a lot of people, if you know Tubular Bells, because it's like the first 4-minute excerpt of the Tubular Bells, which was used in The Exorcist, is on here again. Now, if you're familiar with Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells and you hear this, yeah, it does sound a bit thinner. But it's a completely, to me, fun re-recording of a piece that, because I have Tubular Bells and I've been listening to Tubular Bells since 1973, it's nice to kind of have an alternate version of it, not done by Mike Oldfield. And I like this, even though this can be a little cheesy at times. They actually do, Wendy Carlos did the Shining theme, on the original Shining theme. And this is a pretty creepy synthesizer rendition of the Shining theme, and I like quite a lot on here. But again, people have really blasted it. But this is probably one of my favorite of the type that it is. It sounds like one guy with a bunch of synthesizers went in and re-recorded these themes. And I kind of like that, Those are some of my favorite ones, is to hear new renditions, even if they're in some cases lesser renditions. This is just a lot of fun, this one. And literally, I think almost every track, there's 16 tracks on here. On this, they play on the cable channel Sounds of the Series Halloween music theme. They just channel. Every single one of these gets played, I think, every year. That's a 24-hour-a-day thing, so without commercials, so they've got time to play it, I guess. Here's another one from the same company, Music from the Crypt. This has class where the other one is very similar, very much done on a synthesizer. It could be the same guy that did the other one, except these are, instead of doing horror movie themes, this is themes from all classical pieces that were used in horror movies. And that's what a whole lot of these collections that I have are. And actually, they did mix in a couple things in here that are movie themes. Twilight Zone themes, the Dark Shadows themes, the Psycho theme again, Pet Sematary. But they also have on here, and again, this is a re-recording of, a guy with a synthesizer doing the Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Also Sprach Zasturia, I never knew how to pronounce that. Which was the 2001 theme. Sorcerer's Apprentice, in the Hall of the Mountain King, which is one of my favorites. Oh, and they also do a theme from the Hitchcock movie Vertigo on here. And the Funeral March of a Marionette, which is on a lot of these, that have movie themes on them, because that was used for the old black and white 1950s Alfred Hitchcock Presents TV show. That piece probably got heard by more people by being on that TV show than ever heard it on a classical album. I'm not sure if there's... I think there's more than one of these. Mannheim Steamroller, who does, Chip Davis, who does a lot of seasonal albums, and I think he may have done more than one Halloween one now. This was the first one. And so if you've heard any Halloween music, you've probably heard this one, because this is fairly popular. Mannheim Steamroller, again, synthesizer band with additional musicians. And this is mostly classical things mixed in with sound effects and things like that. That's not my favorite combination. I really prefer the straight music ones, or just have a special effects CD. But this one was really popular. So they do the Sorcerer's Apprentice, Hall of the Mountain King again. It's a great piece of classical music. Night on Bald Mountain, another classical piece that's, I don't think it was ever written with the thought of Halloween, but more like it has that ambiance, and later on was used probably in a lot of movies, probably in the 30s and 40s and 50s ongoing. So it got that association with it. And just great, just a lot of fun. Let's see what I got here. Man, I got more than I thought I did. So more that are essentially probably on this Drew's label. Well, here's screen themes, horrors, music and sounds from classic horror movies. Again, there's a lot. I got a lot of CDs of basically a lot of the same material, and in some cases it's repackaged and compiled in different ways. In others, they're new recordings, but there's no shortage of recordings of these works. Again, Tubular Bells is on here. I didn't check. I think that this is the same company that put out the other ones, and I think this might be more of a compilation of some of the of this one and this one, and they kind of it looks like they took a bunch of themes and from a few different sources and threw them on, and then mixed in a couple new ones. Funeral March from Marionette is on here again, the Tubular Bells version, and I think it's that same synthesizer version on here. But there's a couple that they hadn't done on the prior ones, like the theme from Carrie, the Stephen King movie, something called The Devil's Curse, Lullaby from Rosemary's Baby. Probably a good choice that they haven't done a lot to death on these CDs. So it's kind of a mixture of some of their old stuff and some newer things. And most of these are budget things too. And I bought this in Party City, which is, see, this is why I hold on to the receipt, where I got those Blue Diamond Audio CDs, which I love, which are the stories. Let's see, what did I pay for this? Don't even see it on here. Regular price suggested horror screen of $4.86. Horror screen things look like less than $5 for this particular CD. I think it looks like. Yeah, these are seasonal things, and as easy as they are to get in season, you won't see them outside the season. I don't know. A lot of these I know eventually show up online. Here's another one. The same thing. The Drew's thing again. Company. Fright Flicks. Another basically compilation of tracks from the 3 previous albums of theirs that I showed you. And every once in a while they throw in something different. They throw in the Time Warp from Rocky Horror, which is just awful and doesn't fit in with the rest of the stuff. But they probably recorded it anew again. But Funeral March from Marionette is on here. The Beetlejuice theme, which I didn't see on one of their others. Psycho theme, Nightmare on Elm Street. Again, Tubular Bells. The Omen, Amityville Horror, X-Files theme, Halloween, Jaws theme, Carrie, Tales from the Crypt theme, which is probably new. And I know What You Did Last Summer movie theme, so that was probably new for this. So it seems like every year, because this is much newer than some of the others I showed, they dig up some of the old stuff, record a few new tracks, and compile a new CD. And in the past I have bought them because they were very inexpensive, and just, you know, things to get you in the mood. What else do I have? Getting to more serious classical, like orchestral things now, for the most part. Couldn't pass up because of the cover. Creepy Classics, a Halloween Collection. This is this they actually give credits for, and it's pure classical music with real orchestras. Leonard Bernstein from 1973 doing Mars from the Planets, from Holst, the Planets, which is, you know, probably, I guess, the darkest sounding of the planets, and it's the one that makes it onto these CDs from all of the planets themes. This is the one that really makes it on a lot. Eugene Ormandy Orchestra, Philadelphia Orchestra does Dance Macabre, my favorite serious Halloween piece of all time, Dance Macabre. Now, when I was a kid, here's a little story. Back when I was a kid, they didn't have videotape or CD or DVDs or anything. So once in a while, very rarely, you would get a special treat, and a teacher would wheel in the slide projector. If anybody knows what slides are and slide projectors, you know, they're just these little squares that are that big that are just still photographs that went in a round tray. So you just have to find out where the tray starts, and you'd put one slide in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or, you know, however many go in there. These visions for years of the teacher pushing in this metal cart on wheels. On the top of the cart was a movie projector about that big. You walk into the back of the classroom and project it onto the front board on the front of the room, and have this slide projector. Slide projector had no sound; it was just still frame slides, and a record player on a shelf below the projector. And the record player just had a little built-in speaker, monophonic speaker, big-ass heavy turntable with a speaker built into it. And there used to be this company that I was always fascinated with that made things for schools, that made slide projector shows for schools. And you would get the slides, stick them into the little tray that they went in, and find out where number 1 starts. And there was a little clicker, little mechanical clicker, that progressed each slide. So you would start at, you know, find out where slide number 1 was, and all the slides were numbered. And then you would click it once, and the little turntable in the slide projector would go to the next slide, number 2. Click it again, it would go to number 3. And there were these packages made for schools that were an LP record, a 33 LP record, 12-inch record, and it went with a group of slides. And the presentations were usually maybe about 20 minutes long. And I guess, I'm not sure what would be on the other side of the LP album, if there'd be 2 different presentations, because each would be maybe in the 20-minute field. And you would have these large slide projector turntable things, and you would have maybe 30 or 40 slides or so. The teacher would find slide number 1, get that up on the screen, and have this little clicker that would progress the slides in the tray. And, you know, it wasn't wireless. There was a wire connected to the slide tray and everything, because this is low-tech days. And the record would have little beeps on it, have narration. And it would be somebody talking. It could be a science presentation or something like that, talking about amoebas or germs or whatever. And while the person was narrating this, you would hear this little beep. And the little beep would tell the person operating the slide projector to advance to the next slide. And that's basically how I grew up, on the rare times that we would get to see any kind of films, because videotapes didn't exist and DVDs didn't exist, and the internet and streaming and all that didn't exist. And I had a teacher bring in, and I remember seeing it at least 2 or 3 years in a row. And the teacher brought in Danse Macabre, which was, a classical piece of work, and it goes on for however long it goes on for. It's not long. And there was no narration to it. It was just the music, but made for this specialty slide presentation. And the actual tune itself, the full tune, is only maybe 10 or 12 minutes long, or 15 at tops. And this is my favorite thing in the world that ever happened at school to me. And it happened, like I said, at least 2 or 3 years, maybe more. And Halloween time came around, and the teacher wheeled this thing in, and it was this record of Danse Macabre and this slide projector that somebody had drawn pictures to, still frame, animated pictures, or not animated, but still frame cartoons, essentially, that they created to go with the music of this piece. And what it did is it showed, like the first frame when the music would start, and the first still frame slide would be the sun setting over like a graveyard or something like that. And then as the music progresses, you would hear this little beep during the course of the music that would tell the teacher to progress to the next frame, to the next slide. And then you would see skeletons. There'd be a still frame shot of skeletons coming up from the graves in the graveyard and dancing around. And then there'd be another beep in the music, and you would go on to the third frame, and the third frame would show skeletons and pumpkins dancing around and stuff like that. Those things don't exist anymore, and I kind of wish somebody had made a video of that, just of the still frames with the music the way they originally existed. Not so you don't have to go in and actually go find a slide projector to play it, but rather somebody filmed that, which would be really cool. And I love that. And I was cool that the images weren't animated or anything. It was fine. It was very cool. I was looking at the artwork, and I love that imagery of the artwork of the skeletons dancing. And whoever the artists were really good. They really did fantastic jobs. A lot of background stuff going on, the full moon and the dark clouds at night and all that stuff. And that's where I first heard Danse Macabre as a kid. And I never forgot the piece. And I guess because the film itself was titled Danse Macabre, I remembered the name. And it took me till I was in my 20s to actually go and buy a copy of Danse Macabre, which I have a couple dozen copies, versions of it. A classical piece of music, a really nice piece of music. And this is one of them on here. Orchestra, as I mentioned. This is, to get back to this, this is Leonard Bernstein, Eugene Ormandy. Actually, all of it's Bernstein or Ormandy or Pierre Boulez, doing a bunch of things that are, actually, this is really good because it's Mars, the bringer of war from the planets, but Danse Macabre, but also Night on Bald Mountain, Symphonie Fantastique, from Dream of a Witch's Sabbath, by Hector Berlioz, Sorcerer's Apprentice, a part of the Firebird Suite. This was really a Charles Ives piece, where I first heard Charles Ives was in these compilations. A Bella Bartok thing, which is really apropos to the season and to the music. So whoever compiled this knew it, because Bella Bartok is not stuff that was really used in movies, and so many of these CDs are compiled from classical pieces, not necessarily written about Halloween, but things that had been used a great deal in movies. Hall of the Mountain King, which is another big favorite. This is actually really good, and this is not that old. I bought this in the last few years. Creepy Classics. It's pure Halloween stuff. Pure classical, seriously done, very, 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 very well. Here's another one, and actually put together by the Reader's Digest. Another one called Fright Night. I have like a half a dozen called Fright Night. Classic Halloween music. And again, this is classical stuff, Toccata in D minor, which is that famous organ piece. And I had music that I was going to put on that I forgot to put on. Hold on one second. I'm going to put it on because this should have been playing in the background for the last 30 minutes. And now it's probably too late. Hopefully it's playing. I don't know. I can't see without my glasses. Hold on. I'm getting very unprofessional here. It's not playing. Why is it not playing? It's playing. Don't know if you're going to hear any of it. All right. Well, there's music in the background. I think I might get around the copyright because other people have put this tune up. And if you can't hear it, that's life. Fright Night, Reader's Digest, classic Halloween music again, in the Hall of the Mountain King. Again, this is classical orchestral stuff again. Funeral March of the Marionettes, which is the Alfred Hitchcock theme again. Orchestral, the London Hill Orchestra doing excerpt from Tubular Bells. That's interesting to hear, the orchestral versions of that. This is fairly recent, I guess, because there's one from Harry Potter. The Halloween main theme, the movie theme, Toccata in D, which I mentioned. Night on Bald Mountain again, another one of my favorite pieces. Who is this? They screen from Symphony No. 3 in D minor excerpt. Who is I don't know who the composer that is. Dance Macabre's on here, though. Dream of the Witch's Sabbath from Symphonie Fantastique. I don't know if you can hear the music in the background. If you can, throughout this piece, which goes on for 23 minutes, you'll hear this high-pitched, shrill sound that goes throughout the whole piece. And I hope you can hear that, at least. And this is a piece that has nothing to do with Halloween, but that sound that kind of cascades down, and it's on repeat through the entire 23-minute piece, which otherwise is a synthesizer piece. To me, that sound always sounds like a ghost. I always envision a ghost swinging back and forth between two trees outside late at night, having a grand old time, which is why I'm playing it, and why I associate that piece and that album with Halloween, even though it has nothing to do with Halloween, and I will show that later. Here's a really, really, really interesting one. Music from Castle Dracula. I don't know how true this is, but it claims that the music was actually recorded in or around the Castle Dracula in Romania, the real Dracula, which was a real person, not a vampire. A real person in history that was the fictional character was based on. A haunting and horrific musical tale with narration set to make the skin crawl on a dark, lonely night. Recorded on location in the Carpathian Mountains. Music of the Carpathian Gypsies performed in the caverns beneath Castle Dracula, accompanied by readings from the original text of Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't know who these musicians really are. I don't know if it was really recorded in the caverns beneath the Castle Dracula, but the music is fantastic. It's wow. It's gypsy, kind of like gypsy music, very atmospheric. It claims that it was mixed in Spring Valley, New York, which is a long way from the Carpathian Mountains. And it only lists who does the narration. It's from 1996. It's all original music, and it's a really interesting... I don't recall the readings being a whole lot on here. You know, they do read excerpts from Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, but I think they do very, very little bits of excerpts, pieces of excerpts, maybe at the beginning of each piece, and then let the music play out. The music's really fascinating. Not really scary. I don't think if it had the Dracula connection, you would say it was scary, very interesting, atmospheric, very echoey, so it's hard to pick out instruments. It sounds like an acoustic ensemble, violins and things like that. All original music. There's no movie themes or classical pieces in here. I gotta turn that music down a bit. And again, I never know how loud it comes out on here. And I hope you can hear that little shrill thing that plays throughout. So, prologue, Vlad the Impaler, the Dracula Suite, Peasant's Prophecy, Terror Castle, The Curse of Romany. It's all original music, though. And where did I find? I probably found this online somewhere, maybe Amazon. I didn't think to look to see if somebody. This is pretty obscure. To see if somebody may have posted this up on YouTube. Very interesting album, very interesting music. The only thing that might be annoying to some people is they don't want to hear the readings so much from the novel Dracula that accompany a lot of the tracks. The music is absolutely fascinating and very atmospheric. I wouldn't say scary, but this is a real good, very interesting thing. Wow, I'm going a lot longer here than I ever thought I would. Most of these, the things that got me started on these were compilations like this that are very much probably still out there. Fright Night, this is all big label stuff. CBS Records. This originally came out in 1989. This is just a gathering of, as so many of these are, compilations taken from the classical division of CBS Records of things that have that association with Halloween or horror movies. All classical music. Here's once again, Night on Bald Mountain by Mussorgsky, The Dance Macabre again, Grieg, Hall of the Mountain King, The Funeral March of the Marionette again, which is the Alfred Hitchcock Presents themes, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Toccata in D, Witch's Ride from Hansel and Gretel, March to the Scaffold from Symphonie Fantastique, Mars, The Bringer of War from the Planets again, Wagner, Ride of the Valkyries, which is maybe an unusual selection for this kind of thing. Charles Ives, Halloween, though, fairly oddly enough, not on a lot of these compilations. And the Mephisto Waltz from Franz Liszt. Again, not one that you hear on many of these, and because of the imagery with the Mephisto Waltz, you would think would show up on these. But this is pure classical orchestral Halloween music, and if it wasn't packaged like this, you might not, and if we're just packaged as a classical CD of various themes from various places, you would listen to it as such and probably not have any of that imagery that goes along with it. These are great pieces, and they clearly can be listened to any time of year. And I have a lot of these. Some of these I bought, these are all different recordings of classical pieces, pretty much of the same classical pieces, and I bought them just to have different versions of them. Most of these have Dance Macabre on it, which I can't have enough of, and some of these I bought just have more versions of even the same stuff, and I love the covers. I love this particular cover, and I love the Decca London record label anyway. I'm a bit of a sucker for their stuff. So here's another one called Witch's Brew. I have more than one called Witch's Brew. Again, Funeral March of the Marionette, but they've got some different stuff on here. And this is all the New Symphony Orchestra of London and the Orchestra of the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden. So big deal orchestral, serious classical stuff. Funeral March of Marionette on here, Faust ballet music. Again, Franz Liszt, Mephisto Waltz, oddly, was on the last one, but doesn't show up on a lot of these. Once again, the Witch's Ride from Hansel and Gretel, another version of Dance Macabre, which is fine with me. Night on Bald Mountain, Pictures at an Exhibition, a section from that again. And another piece that I think is unique to this album, Sir Malcolm Arnold's Tam O'Shanter Overture, which offhand I don't remember. So that one I'm not aware of that being used so much in a movie. Maybe it was, or maybe it's just something that sounds like it belongs on something. But I love this. I love that cover. Love that cover. Another one called Witch's Brew. Again, out of print. Again, more orchestral stuff. They cram this. This is 78 minutes long. I know this is another one that was made in England originally from 1993, but still, again, different orchestral versions of Danse Macabre. Night on Bear Mountain. Two Russian Witches, which is a nice classical piece that doesn't see the light of day a lot on these. Berlitz's Symphonie Fantastique again. Mendelssohn, A Midsummer Night's Dream, a strange choice. Debussy on here, which is a very strange choice because most of his stuff is just pretty. Preludes, Book 1, The Dance of Puck. I know the Preludes. I don't recall what this particular piece sounds like. I don't recall any being evil sounding at all. But Mendelssohn and the Grieg, March of the Dwarfs. So that's a slightly different one. Sorcerer's Apprentice, Host the Planets. This one is Uranus, the Magician, though, not Mars. Interesting choice. And an original suite was put on here by somebody named Marissa Robles, who plays the harp and wrote a little Halloween suite, and with just harp and guitar, not harp and flute. Sorry, and it's a 4-piece little Narnia suite, it's called, but it's got something called the Magician and the White Witch in there. So I guess it's they must have pulled that off of one of their oddball CDs. Interesting. It's something called something from Liszt, which is not somebody that pops up a whole lot. Totentat's Dance of Death, the finale, is on here. So I use these. I like the mood. I like the atmosphere. Again, I always know some of the pieces because there's a zillion versions of Danse Macabre, Hall of the Mountain King, Night on Bald Mountain, things like that. But then I really get attracted to the new pieces too as a way to discover other artists and other pieces. And if I really dig those pieces I'm not familiar with, I'll go look for the full orchestral version of that. Now here's another one that's not specifically marketed for Halloween. There's nothing on there. It says Halloween except for the cover, and I had to buy it for the cover. Now this is strictly Mussorgsky for the most part, and Balakarev, which is not a composer that I was familiar with prior. And these are older recordings. It looks like they're from 54 and 56. But man, I couldn't. First of all, again, Decca London recording. Which I love. Is that London? Decca? This one only says Decca, but I know London's part of Decca's part of the London group or whatever. So it's Mussorgsky's pieces, Pictures and Exhibition, which is his biggie, which is over a half hour. Night on Bear Mountain, which is a thing that ends up on a lot of the Halloween compilation things. And some other pieces that I wasn't prior familiar with and don't necessarily have the Halloween vibe necessarily, but are good pieces. And the Millie Balakarev piece, which is 20-minute symphonic poem. I remember liking it very much. Now I'm kind of into things that remind me of Halloween, but aren't specific Halloween albums. Schoenberg, because it's just so damn weird. And I had this for a long time. Remember playing it and liking it. It's weird stuff. But not associating it with Halloween until I was reading somebody's review of one of these other Halloween compilation classical CDs, and they said, how come people aren't putting Schoenberg stuff on these CDs? Some of that music that Schoenberg made is so fitting and apropos to the season and bizarre and weird, and it made me go and pull this out, which I had for many years. And sure enough, they're right. There's a lot of weird Schoenberg stuff going on. Just in terms of the harmonies and dissonance. It's very cool stuff, which now I associate with Halloween. And this is the only, until Axel sent me the Dvorak CD and turned me on to a bunch of Dvorak music, this is the only full-length Dvorak thing that I had, just Dvorak on its own. I had a lot of Dvorak sampler pieces on various artist CDs where they would take, a 5-minute excerpt of a Dvorak piece that, usually something very well known, and compile it with a bunch of other artists. But the only full-length Dvorak CD that I had prior to Axel sending me some of the stuff that he sent me was this particular one. And this is a recording. This came out in 99, and I think it was a new recording at the time, 1999. So it's a fairly new recording. And I bought this Symphony No. 8, which was really good. But the reason I ended up always playing this now at Halloween, I've had this, maybe about 10 years, is there's a piece on here called The Noon Witch. And couldn't not buy it. So, and because I kind of file this in my classical selection along with those albums that are primarily Halloween listening classical albums, it's going to continue. And this is actually a really good album. Now I get to a very small subdivision, and the thing that I'm playing in the background, Manuel Gotching solo album, which is sometimes put out as an Asherah Temple or an Asherah album. This is the thing that's playing in the background. It's called Dreams and Desire. It was recorded in 1977, but did not come out until the 90s. So it was recorded at the same time as New Age of Earth, which is, and this and New Age of Earth are always battling it out for my number one favorite Manuel Gotching album. And by far, I always seem to prefer the ones that Manuel did himself, on his own, totally in the studio, without additional musicians. I do have some others that are duets, which are fine, which I like. But the top two is always Dreams and Desire, which is this album that consists of just 3 long pieces, and New Age of Earth. What does this have to do with Halloween? Absolutely nothing, but this is the piece that I have been playing in the background. And it's a piece on here called Desire. It's about 23 minutes long, and it's very much of a synthesizer keyboard thing. There's not a lot of guitar in this album, probably even less than on New Age of Earth. So, his top 2 albums in my book, oddly enough, are ones both from the same time, both from 1977, when he became very fascinated with the new synthesizers that were coming out at the time, and made a couple albums consisting primarily of that. The thing that drives me to play this album always at Halloween is this piece Desire, because it has this shrill thing that, in my mind, since the first time I heard it, sounds like a ghost flying around, like I said before, between a couple trees in a dark yard somewhere by an old wooden fence, which actually sounds very much like the backyard where I used to live. Had an old broken wooden fence and some old gnarly trees, bare trees. From the autumn time to Halloween, and it's got this sound effect playing throughout the entire piece of this little shrill thing that goes down. It starts off real high pitched, it goes down, and then when it kind of reaches a certain level, it starts all over again at the top. It goes throughout the entire 23-minute piece, and from the first time I heard it, it sounded like a ghost to me. And for that reason, I've always associated this album with Halloween, and I'll be damned if I don't always play it every Halloween. So now I'm on to albums, and there's only a few of them, that every year I play at Halloween. They have nothing to do with Halloween, and yet I associate them with Halloween. And here's one that's I'm guessing a bunch of people probably have that, Dreams and Desire, even though it's not one of Manuel's necessarily better-known albums. But here's a bunch that I'm sure people have. Green Desert by Tangerine Dream. Now, usually, when something has a cover like this, and it suggests heat and hot in the summertime, there's nothing in the world that would make me associate it with the cold autumn time that is Halloween. And what happened is I bought this album, and I played it when I got it, put it aside. And years later, and I can remember very specifically, I pulled it down to listen to it again after not having heard it for many years, and it just so happened to be 2 or 3 weeks before Halloween. And it was the first time that I heard it that I really loved it, oh wow, that's a really good album. I played it repeatedly during that Halloween season. Maybe it was 10 years ago now. And even though I had the album prior to that, that repeated playing of it is what made me associate it with Halloween. And ever since then, every Halloween season comes around, I gotta hear it in full. I don't think it's musically one of their best albums, but oddly enough, it's one of my favorite albums by them. Very short, as a lot of their albums were at the time. And because it's under 40 minutes, I always tend to want to hear more. And I play another album by Tangerine Dream to go along with it. And musically, I wanted to stay in that same style, that same type of music that's on Green Desert here. And Green Desert was a bit of an oddity because it was partially originally recorded in 1973 and shelved and not released. And then around 84 or so, Edgar Froese went in and re-recorded a whole bunch of new parts and threw new parts on top of what was there. So it's a real mishmash of early 70s and early 80s stuff. So stylistically, it certainly doesn't fit in with the early 70s stuff that they were recording. And it doesn't really so much fit in with the early 80s stuff either that was going on. And the closest, and because it's so short, because it's under 40 minutes, I always want to hear more. I love the mood of it. I went and found the next closest musically and vibe-wise album to it, which is Ricochet. Supposedly live, but a lot of it was really recorded in the studio. And even though I don't necessarily associate Ricochet with Halloween, I'm starting to, only because I always play it as a companion to this. And these two would make a killer CD. Virgin Records, if you ever want to make some money, they should really combine these two on one album. They would both fit, because this is way under 40 minutes. It's like 35, 36 minutes. They would both fit on one CD nicely. And musically, it's in the same place, and this only has 2 long pieces on it. And maybe the reason that I don't associate Ricochet so much with Halloween is because I did listen to this one a whole lot before I got into that Halloween rhythm with playing it. Whereas Green Desert, I didn't play that much until that Halloween season. But I do, when I'm putting on Green Desert, I'm always putting on Ricochet behind it, and I'm always playing Green Desert around Halloween. And here's just a couple others to close out. Here's if you were around in the late 80s or early 90s, when Omni Magazine was putting out these very, very cheap, inexpensive compilations. I think I have more than this one, but this is the only one that's popped up in recent years. So if I have others, they're hiding somewhere. I kind of associate it a little bit with Halloween, and it's just, all these are pieces from existing albums, nothing rare, very short. The CDs run about 45 minutes. They didn't pack them to the gills, certainly, but they were budget things. Omni Magazine, which sadly isn't even around anymore, but kind of cool. It introduced me to a few different artists that I hadn't sampled before, and I ended up buying full-length albums by. These are fun, and for a lot of years, I think they're starting to get scarce now. For a lot of years, though, these remaining copies of these out-of-print CDs were still around and can be had for cheap prices. And if you look at the artists and you like kind of electronic music and you're not familiar with them, it's a great introduction to them. I bought a crap load of CDs as a result of having these. And just a couple more. Here's one. I'm showing the alternate cover of this. Mysterious Barricades, which was Andy Summers from The Police. His second solo album, but it was his first solo album that was instrumental. His first solo album was basically pop songs, like The Police. He signed with Private Music, and the first album he put out with Private Music was Mysterious Barricades, which is just him on guitar and Dave Henschel on keyboards. Dave Henschel, very well known as a recording engineer, actually, and he recorded many Genesis albums during the late 70s or so. Private Music put it out. This is an Italian reissue of the album with a different cover, and I just had to have it. I love this album so much, and it's just a slightly the cover's different. The music is all this identical, but this is an Italian issued version of Mysterious Barricades. And because there's no percussion, it's just the guitars and the keyboards. There's a couple pieces that have a slight electronic unsettled edge to it, which is nice this time of year. And the only other ones I have, oddly enough, are also Tangerine Dream, which I don't necessarily play when I play Green Desert or Ricochet, but on their own, just in recent years because they're newer releases, I've kind of started to associate with Halloween a little bit, and that's because it's a science fiction themed album. Chandra, The Phantom Ferry Part 1, and this one just came out a year or so ago, Chandra, The Phantom Ferry Part 2, which they didn't even bother to do much of a variation of the covers. These are, despite the name, are Edgar Froese solo albums. There's no other musicians on there. Edgar wrote all the pieces himself, recorded them in his home in Vienna. And it's kind of based on a very short science fiction story that Edgar wrote. And I thought there was going to be more of the story in there, but it's not so much of a story as it's about a paragraph of this kind of... it claims it was inspired by some real papers that were left behind in this observatory in Greenland somewhere. But how much, what the papers actually contained and how much of that is truth is unknown. And it seems like Edgar started to write a story about them, but the story is no more than a single paragraph. And did this, I think, in 2009, and it took 5 or 6 years for the second part to come out. And when the second part came out, there's not much more of the story in there. Actually, another paragraph of the story that basically just reiterates the story of this engineer in Greenland alone at this Arctic station working on something technical, where he meets up with an alien and has a discussion with an alien. But that's it. That's the whole story. There's no details about the discussion with the alien, what happens as a result of meeting this alien, or nothing like that. I thought there would be more. It's a fiction story, obviously. I thought there would be more of a story than that to it. But I guess because of the imagery of the story and the cover, the satellite, science fiction element, that I began to associate it with Halloween. Therefore, it's now become a Halloween standard listening. And I had no intention on going on for an hour, and I've bored you all to death. But, I promised to do this, and I'm interested in folks that have those seasonal things that every year, without attempting to, it's not something I don't listen to these to get into the season. It's the other way around. I'm getting into the season and something happens and I get this desire to hear these pieces. So I hope other people have the seasonal musical thing. I'm sure out in the VC it's not uncommon. So if anybody does have one, they want to do a video on it, especially if you have autumn Halloween kind of vibe things like this. I would love to see or hear about it. So that's my Halloween music associated things, and sorry for going on for an hour again, almost an hour. And I'll be back with something or other soon. Okay, guys, thanks for watching.